8, my family moved into an old Victorian house on Maple Street. It had been abandoned for years, and my parents got it for a steal. They said it would be a fresh start. Little did they know it would be the beginning of my lifelong nightmare. My bedroom was on the second floor, overlooking the street. From the first night, I felt an uneasy presence, like someone was watching me. I shrugged it off as my imagination, but that didn't stop the fear from creeping in. One night, I was home alone with my best friend, Tommy. My parents were out for dinner and wouldn't be back until late. We were playing video games in the living room when the power suddenly went out. The house plunged into darkness, except for the faint glow of the streetlights outside. "Whoa, what happened?" Tommy asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't know," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Maybe a fuse blew. I'll go check the basement." I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and motioned for Tommy to follow me. We made our way to the basement door, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness. The old wooden stairs creaked under our weight as we descended. The basement was cold and damp, filled with old furniture and boxes. I headed for the fuse box, but something caught my eye. In the corner of the room, partially hidden behind a stack of boxes, was a dusty old mirror. "Hey, look at us," Tommy said, pointing at the mirror. "It looks ancient." I shined the flashlight on it and saw our reflections staring back at us. But there was something off. Our reflections seemed distorted, almost like they were moving independently of us. "Do you see that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Yeah," Tommy replied, his eyes wide with fear. "Let's get out of here." As we turned to leave, the basement door slammed shut, plunging us into complete darkness. We both screamed and ran towards the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Help! Somebody help us!" I yelled, pounding on the door. Suddenly, the whispering started again. This time, it was louder and more insistent. "Help us! Please help Yuyus." Tommy and I huddled together, too scared to move. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move in the mirror. It was a figure, shadowy and indistinct, but definitely there. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. The figure stepped closer, and I could see it more clearly. It was a woman, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow and lifeless. "Please help us," she whispered, her voice echoing in the darkness. "What do you want?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. She pointed towards the back of the basement, where an old trunk sat. I hadn't noticed it before, but now it seemed to glow with an eerie light. "Open it," she said. "Release us." I looked at Tommy, who nodded silently. We slowly approached the trunk, my hands trembling as I lifted the lid. Inside were old clothes, books, and a diary. I picked up the diary and opened it, the pages yellowed with age. As I read, the story unfolded. The woman in the mirror had once lived in this house along with her husband and daughter. They had all died tragically in a fire, and their spirits had been trapped here ever since. "We have to help them," I said, looking at Tommy. "How?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "There must be something in here that can break the curse," I replied, flipping through the pages of the diary. We spent the next hour reading, trying to find a way to release the spirits. Finally, we found it. The diary mentioned a ritual that needed to be performed, using items from the trunk. We gathered the items, a locket, a candle, and a piece of fabric, and followed the instructions carefully. As we completed the ritual, the air in the basement grew warmer, and the whispers grew louder. "Thank you," the woman's voice echoed one last time, before fading away. The door to the basement creaked open, and we rushed upstairs, our hearts still pounding. The power had come back on, and the house was silent once more. My parents returned home shortly after, unaware of the ordeal we had just been through. Tommy and I never spoke of that night again, but the memories haunted me for years to come. Years later, when I was 16, I had almost forgotten about that night in the basement. My family still lived on Maple Street, and the house had been relatively quiet. One evening, my parents went out of town, leaving me home alone for the weekend. I invited my girlfriend Emily over to keep me company. We were watching a movie in the living room when the power flickered and went out. The house was plunged into darkness, and a sense of déjà vu washed over me. "Not again," I muttered under my breath. "What's going on?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Probably just a power outage," I said, trying to reassure her. "I'll go check the breaker." I grabbed a flashlight and led Emily to the basement. The old wooden stairs creaked just as they had years before. As we reached the bottom, I saw the same dusty mirror in the corner. "I hate this place," I said, shining the flashlight towards the fuse box. Emily stayed close, her eyes darting around the room. Let's make this quick. I flipped the switch on the fuse box, but nothing happened. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the basement, and the whispering started again. Help us. Emily grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with fear. Did you hear that? Yeah, I replied, my voice trembling. We need to get out of here. As we turned to leave, the basement door slammed shut, trapping us inside. The whispering grew louder, and the temperature dropped even further. Help us. Please help you us. I shined the flashlight on the mirror and saw the same ghostly figure. This time, she was accompanied by a man and a young girl. What do you want from us? I demanded, my voice echoing in the dark. Release us, the woman pleaded. You must finish what you started. I realized then that the ritual we had performed years ago hadn't fully freed them. There was still something keeping them trapped. Emily, we need to find the diary, I said, looking around the basement. We searched through the boxes and finally found the trunk. The diary was still there, along with the other items. I flipped through the pages, searching for anything we might have missed. There's another part to the ritual, I said, my heart sinking. We need to burn the items to break the curse completely. Emily and I gathered the locket, candle, and fabric and brought them upstairs to the fireplace. We lit the candle and placed the items in the flames. As they burned, the whispering grew louder, then stopped abruptly. A sense of peace washed over me, and the house seemed to grow warmer. The spirits were finally at rest. Emily and I sat in silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. I knew then that the haunting was over, but the memories would stay with me forever. Years passed, and I eventually moved away from Maple Street. I started a family of my own, hoping to leave the past behind. But the house never truly left me. One evening, while visiting my parents, my wife Sarah and I decided to stay the night with our young daughter Lily. After dinner, Sarah and I were putting Lily to bed in my old room. The memories of my childhood came flooding back, but I pushed them aside, focusing on my family. Good night, sweetheart, I said, kissing Lily on the forehead. Good night, Daddy, she replied, snuggling under the covers. Sarah and I retired to the guest room, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of Lily crying. I rushed to her room, finding her sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong, sweetie? I asked, sitting beside her. There's a lady in the mirror, she whispered, pointing to the antique mirror on the wall. A chill ran down my spine as I turned to look. The mirror was empty, but I knew better. I hugged Lily tightly, trying to comfort her. It's okay, honey. There's no one there, I said, even though I wasn't entirely sure. Sarah joined us, concern etched on her face. Is everything all right? Just a nightmare, I replied, trying to sound convincing. Let's get her back to sleep. We settled Lily back into bed and returned to our room, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the past. Around 3 a.m., the whispering started again. It was faint, but unmistakable. Help us. I got out of bed and walked down the hall to the basement door. The air grew colder with each step. I descended the stairs, flashlight in hand, and faced the mirror once more. The spirits were there, but something was different. They seemed more desperate, their faces etched with sorrow. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice trembling. Help us. Free you as they pleaded. I realized then that my earlier attempts had been in vain. The spirits were still trapped, and they needed my help to move on. I'll do whatever it takes, I said, my resolve strengthening. I spent the next few hours researching rituals and ways to communicate with the dead. I found a passage that mentioned a final ritual, one that required a blood sacrifice. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked, worry evident in her eyes. I have to do this, I replied. It's the only way to end this once and for all. We gathered the necessary items and returned to the basement. I followed the instructions carefully, cutting my hand and letting a few drops of blood fall into the mirror. The spirits grew brighter, their forms more defined. The woman stepped forward, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. We are free. As the spirits faded away, the house seemed to come alive with warmth and light. The curse was finally broken. I bandaged my hand and hugged Sarah, relief washing over me. It's over, I said, tears streaming down my face. It's finally over. We returned to bed, holding each other tightly. The haunting of Maple Street was at an end, but the memories would stay with me forever. I had faced my fears and freed the spirits, and now I could finally move on with my life. Also, in the end, just don't forget, it wasn't just a puppy, so you better click that subscribe button.